Hey, Work Positive Nation, if you're new here, welcome to Season 3. I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett, host of the Work Positive Podcast. So, when was the last time you and your team left your offices, like went outdoors to walk and talk in nature? Talking business while walking in nature encourages productive conversations, engages creative thinking, and enhances excellent well being. My guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast fosters personal and professional development in mindfulness, resilience, and mental health. And she specializes in working with clients in natural settings. So grab your phone, get outdoors, or at least put the window down as you're driving and turn up this episode of the Work Positive Podcast.
Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach, and culture architect, Dr. Joey Fawcett. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Joey talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Joey.
Hey, Work Positive Nation, are you outdoors listening to this episode? You should be, because my new best friend is Karen Liebenguth, and Karen is here to help us get outdoors and do some creative thinking and innovation. Karen, good day to you.
Thank you. Hello, and I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you on because obviously you have plants in the background. I have plants in the background. Plants are in my foreground. Plants are all over my office. So I'm doing my very best to bring the outdoors indoors, right?
Absolutely. So helpful to have nature around us.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that in reading your bio and connecting with you, Karen, in preparation for this podcast that really stuck out to me about your work. How did you get started? What was the genesis, pun intended,
Mm,
what was the genesis of your understanding of how prosperous it is for human beings to work in nature?
Yeah, it comes from my own experience.
Hmm.
From a young age, I spent a lot of time outdoors, thanks to my mother, who loved being in nature.
Hmm.
And so we would spend a lot of time roaming around the woods and on our bikes and looking at plants and trees. And I think from an early age, I experienced how different I felt after a day out in nature.
Hmm.
And spending time in nature became a big part, integral part, I would say, of my life.
So as a young
To
girl,
have
what,
balance,
yeah, the
to feel
balance.
balance, to
Yeah.
be well, to have perspective, to
Hmm.
regulate. I wouldn't have called it then that I was regulating my nervous system, but that was what was happening. Spending time outside helped me to feel grounded, calm, with a sort of sense of this fun feeling fundamentally I'm okay,
Hmm.
even in the midst of life happening.
Yeah, and the insanity that sometimes assaults us, right?
Yeah.
Or at least the craziness. So you noticed this as a young girl. What was your experience as you became a teen and then a young woman? What did you notice?
Yeah, so spending time outside really became important to me. So when I was a child, I spent a lot of time in the stables, but also playing outside with my friends. So everything was really happening outside.
Hmm.
And when I was a teenager, when I had my first boyfriend, he happened to be a nature lover, probably also influenced by me.
Hmm.
We would be on our bikes, we would go on long cycle rides, camping with our tent, with our cooking gear, lots of walks. So a lot of outdoor activity because it did me so much good. It always gave me a sense of perspective. And from a young age, I also knew that when I spend time outside, that's when I have my best ideas.
Ah,
And
talk,
that has been a revelation.
wow. Talk to us about those best ideas germinating outdoors.
Yeah. So whenever I was feeling stuck when I was a young person, particularly in school, I didn't like school particularly, to be honest.
Well, you're indoors all the time, right?
Indoors all the time, a bit stuck in my head. I always wanted to be outside.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed when I took myself on a cycle ride or to the park or along the river, something inside would loosen, soften.
Mm,
My heart would open more, my mind would be more open, and I could have a greater sense of perspective. And when my mind opened, my heart opened up more because I was outside, grounded. I had ideas. I could see more, I like to say, into my life and what was possible, or the next step I could take, or how I could write that essay that I needed to write for school.
mhm,
So it gave me, it was a real resource for me, I would say, being outside, because whenever I went outside, I came back differently with
mm,
more ideas,
mhm,
feeling more creative, open, connected to myself and life.
mm.
And life felt more manageable.
Ah, life felt more manageable. There's the gold right there. How to make your life more manageable, right? Spend more
Yeah,
time. And yet, that is so counterintuitive, as we just noted, to formal education. Even though recess was probably your favorite period of the day, right? Because we typically got outdoors. And it's so counterintuitive to what work is today, because work typically is putting someone in a desk, a cubicle even, and putting them in front of a screen with blue light assaulting their circadian rhythms, right? And we leave them there and expect them to stay there, or we're put there, or we put ourselves there and expected to stay there until a certain amount of work is done, and we label it all productivity. Talk to us about how we in Work Positive Nation can move the needle towards more of a connection with nature and less screen time.
yeah. When I work with particularly managers, leaders in the workplace, and when they complain about
Mm,
feeling stuck, not very creative, I encourage people. Well, firstly, I invite them to come with me on a walk and talk. If possible, I suggest let's go outside. And most people love that, to
mhm,
get out of the boardroom, the meeting room. Most people say, yes, I want to go outside. And we walk and do the coaching work.
mm,
So that's one thing. And then I encourage people in the workplace to take regular breaks and to step outside, even if they work on the 20th floor or 30th floor, to go down, take the lift downstairs, walk around the block, connect to the earth that's always there under our feet,
mm.
under the concrete, the pavement, it's there. And we have imagination. We can use our imagination. The sky is always there. And I encourage people to step outside, walk around the block, even if it's only for 10 minutes, and to connect.
Mm,
Earth, sky, the air, space around us.
mm,
And to notice the difference and to then return to the desk. 10 minutes. It's very little time. Very hard to do for most people.
yeah. Well, a body at rest remains at rest, right? So
Oh,
we're
yeah,
sitting in a chair sedentary, then we rest. I read several studies recently that suggested sitting has become the new smoking in terms of it being harmful to
yeah,
our health. So what you're
yeah.
describing is very good. Even if it's just a tree planted in a sidewalk and it's got some dirt around it, go stand beside the tree and get your feet, right? To throw your
Yeah,
shoes at least on some dirt and breathe some air that's different from the filtered air that's in your workspace.
definitely.
So, creating a positive work culture, first of all, means establishing a work culture that has something that I love your word earlier, softens the human being to do the most productive work, which has to do with imagination and innovation and things like that. What are some things that we can do today to begin creating that kind of positive work culture so that we attract top talent?
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's creating a work culture where people can feel safe,
Okay.
where they feel they have dignity
Mm,
and they feel they belong.
mm,
And feeling safe has a lot to do with trust, being trusted, being believed,
mm,
being heard, having autonomy,
mm,
and having a sense of dignity has a lot to do with respect, authenticity. So a work culture where people feel they can be who they are,
mm,
even if that means perhaps not like everybody else. And of course, we are all unique, but often in work cultures, people sometimes feel they have to be like everybody else, to
mm,
fit in, to belong, to be liked.
mm,
I
mm,
think a positive work culture is one of trust and honesty, where people have space to be. And I think it starts with the leaders who model that.
mm, mm. So nature becomes that place where we can get out of the office and get into the better versions of who we are and show dignity and respect to one another.
Ah,
So, if those are the qualities that we want to create in our positive work culture so that we attract top talent, how do we communicate? Here's who we are, here's how we roll, and integrate that with nature. How do we communicate that to top talent so that they say, yes, this is the company I want to align with?
yeah, I think it's sort of leaders in particular
Mhm.
telling the story of the work culture, the place
Mm,
that they have created, they want top talents to come into. I think that's often missing. We talk about things, a lot of our life is conceptual, mediated by our stories and beliefs and views.
mhm,
I think this is about perhaps inviting people in and to get a sense of the work culture, how we do things around the place and what's possible. Yeah, and to say it, or leaders talking about when I need a new idea or when I'm thinking about a project, I take myself off site. I go into the local park, or I spend half a day in the countryside. That's work for me.
mm,
Yeah, when I need to reflect and think things through and prepare the next senior leadership meeting, I go somewhere else. I'm not doing it here, and you can do the same. And I think it's really modeling and living work culture. I think there's too much for my liking, the talking about it, but actually the life happening, living the positive work culture is seeing people do it, getting outside, stepping to the window, spending half a day walking in the countryside and coming back, yeah, with new ideas, but really new ideas, not recycled ideas. Yeah, innovation is not recycled ideas that we've gone around already, yeah,
mhm.
stirred 100 times. But innovation is, wow, yeah, truly a new way of doing something.
Mm,
Innovation for me, yeah,
mm,
creativity is, and I think particularly in nature, or for some people is it's why doing sports or running. But I think particularly in nature, because the outer space creates more inner space and we are more embodied, connected to our direct experience rather than being up here. Because new ideas do not come from the analytical mind.
mm,
New ideas come from the body, yeah,
mm,
our intuition, instinct, deeper layers of knowing what has to happen next. And so coming back to your question, how to communicate positive work culture is, I think, inviting people in and showing them around and telling them what a day looks like, how we do things around the place, what are some things that we do around the place. And so with that, giving permission, oh, yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I can be who I am here, and there's different things possible.
Mm-hmm. And modeling that, as you indicated, becomes a way of ensuring that we retain that top talent, that they don't become dissatisfied and want to leave, but instead lean into that culture. Uh, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm going as soon as this is over to work with a team, and we're going to be at a lake, and we're going to be outside. We'll be seeing the lake the entire time, and just that centering that occurs there, and the innovation, but particularly the relationships. So we know about those kinds of offsite things, but how can we help retain top talent in more of a consistent basis? Because these kinds of offsites in nature happen so rarely. What are some things that we as HR leaders particularly can do to make sure that our culture reinforces the influence of nature to help soften us up for innovation?
Yeah, I think it's the continuity of walking the talk, if you like, consistency, continuity. Often we say great things when people arrive, and then where are they?
I know.
Where are these things that
Mhm.
sound so great when we first arrive at a place?
Mm.
So I think there's, as HR and leaders, walking the talk, modeling, doing the things we think help us create a positive work culture, so that people who come like it, feel safe, can trust that.
Mm.
So again, it's about taking regular breaks, stepping outside, moving the body,
Mm.
even if we think we don't have time to step outside literally because we feel we have too much work to do, stepping to the window, looking at the sky. And to be honest, I don't really buy into not having time to go outside. I
Why is
think
that,
HR
Karen?
people and leaders and team leaders
Mm.
have to encourage their staff to get outside,
Okay. So
to
I should,
really do it, not just talking about it, nature's good for us, but let's get outside.
let's go do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key, is let us, rather than just me going out. I mean, certainly there are times where I need to be solitary if I'm seeking some innovation
Yeah.
or a new perspective on something that's unique to me. But just having a walking friend or something like
Yeah.
that, just to say, hey, let's go for a
Buddy.
walk. Yeah, walking buddy. Hey, let's go for a walk and talk. Um,
I think the more people do it in an organization, particularly HR,
hmm,
leaders, team leaders, if they do it, we know it. It's not rocket science, and this is not new what I'm saying here,
right.
but it's the key, isn't it? People in these leading positions can really show, oh, this is really happening here, and this is
Mm,
what is a big part of retention.
mhm,
That it's not just, oh yeah, they talk about it, but it doesn't really happen, and there's disappointment.
mm,
But what holds people in the workplace is where there's genuine actions, and there's action behind words, and people who talk about it actually do it. And we know if leaders do it, including HR, oh yeah, I can do it.
mm,
Yeah, I'm allowed to do this here. This is
mm,
how we do things around here. That's
mm.
culture, isn't it?
Yeah, it
How we
is.
do things around the place.
Yeah, and you can post all the values you want on the wall or on computer screens, but until you live them out, they uh, lack life. But as you live them out, then people lean in, trust you
Yeah,
more, believe this is a culture, and so then your competitive
yeah.
advantage shows up of innovation and creativity. Karen Liebenguth is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast. Down in the show notes, if you're on your Peloton or walking your dog or whatever, you can go down to the show notes and you can find her LinkedIn profile where you can connect with her, send her messages, and look at her profile and things like that, the kind of work she does. Also, you can go to parsival.co.uk. That URL is in the show notes also, so you can go there. And we'll talk more in a minute about what you'll find when you go there. So, Karen, what are some of the challenges that you're discovering for leaders, particularly in human capital, human resources, today in creating this kind of culture?
Yeah, I think it's a lack of leadership, walking the talk,
Okay.
being really behind, as you've just said, not just talking about the values, but actually living them.
Hmm.
I can't stress it enough. And it's a great challenge to actually live and model the values that we want to see and be lived, if you like, in the workplace. And I think when people come into workplace and they see there's a gap between what we talk about and how it's lived or not lived,
Mm-hmm.
it undermines trust and credibility.
So,
And those are some of the challenges, I think, trust, particularly in leadership, in what people say and then what they do, actually, or not do.
what creates this disconnect between who we say we are and who we actually are? And think about it from a leader perspective. There's some barriers that are keeping me from doing what I say. What are some of those that you've observed and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, I think for leaders, it's very much about beginning to understand themselves and their inner life, what might get in the way of saying something but not being able to actually live it, because sometimes as leaders we need to own up to our shortcomings or to our mistakes. So I think a barrier could be fear of being vulnerable. I see that a lot, fear of being judged by others.
Yes.
And need to be seen as strong, perfect, which nobody is. So
Not
I
yet,
think for
anyway,
leaders,
right?
it's for leaders really getting to know themselves very well, their tendencies, impulses, their strength, but also owning up to where there's work in progress, perhaps, that they don't always walk the talk, but that is something they want to do better. So I think humility needs courage. So humility involves being able to be vulnerable, being able to receive feedback, being able to learn, being willing to learn, rather than being right. So I think that often gets in the way as leaders. We want to do well and appear strong and be right. And but people pick up on that when it's not genuine. When a leader becomes humble and draws back the curtain, as I like to say, and show their humanity, then there's trust. And that's a tall task. That's a
very tall, particularly for my generation, and particularly for males, at least in my experience in working with leaders and working with myself as well. So, what are some, and we have four generations in the workplace, oftentimes, sometimes five now. And to their credit, Gen Z is calling BS on that lack of vulnerability and lack of authenticity and things like that. So, how can I, as a leader, become more self-aware? What are some activities in which I can engage so that I become more transparent, vulnerable in an appropriate way to demonstrate the best strength and version of myself?
Yeah. So awareness, practicing becoming more aware, and a good way of becoming more aware is self-reflection, journaling, spending some time every day reflecting on the day. Yeah, how have I been? What have I noticed today? How have I been with myself? Often, particularly leaders suffer from harsh self-criticism,
Yeah, the inner critic
harsh
is strong. That voice is
self-judgment.
loud, right?
Yeah, Joyce, yeah, inner critic often very loud,
Mhm.
and mistakes are not allowed often. Yeah, and many shoulding is present, and the voice of should is very loud. So spending a little time every day, 10, 15 minutes for self-reflection is very valuable for anyone, but particularly leaders, to become more aware of what's going on in their inner life, in their mind, the habits of the mind. And that also helps with becoming kinder to
Mm,
oneself. Yeah, not as
mhm.
I never use kindness in a sort of sentimental way,
Right.
but kindness as an open, curious, courageous, really looking what's going on. Also including the things that have gone well.
Hmm.
So self-inquiry, self-reflection, and then also noticing in the reflective practice the attitude that a leader brings to themselves and others.
Mm,
Often the attitude is harsh and closed and not so curious
mm.
and hostile towards themselves and aversive, resistant often. So beginning to notice, really noticing without judgment, but curiosity and openness can be a very, very good start. Not easy, but very fruitful.
Very fruitful, but it is a different activity for many,
Yeah,
many leaders.
yeah.
Some leaders find it valuable, even essential in this process of transformation to have someone like you as a
Mm,
coach or a guide, or dare I say, Sherpa, along the
yeah.
way to help in that journey. So, what's the value of coaching in this journey towards self-reflection?
Yeah, it's very much what you've just said. You've put it so well. And I was going to say at the end of what I said about self-reflection,
Hmm.
it's much harder to do that for oneself,
I
to be
think so.
one's own best coach and doing the work. So coaching is very much about um, having someone alongside
Mm,
ourselves to hold the space for a kind, compassionate space,
mm,
a curious space for exploring oneself. Yeah, some of the habits, some of the tendencies, the conditioned tendencies we have,
mm,
and to have a kind person next to ourselves to reflect back, to challenge, to ask important questions. But in that space where everything is welcome. And that, of course, can be hugely encouraging and growthful, where there's a safe space, coming back to safety.
mhm,
Yeah, and where's dignity, yeah, where everybody can show up. That's how I work. Everybody can show up as they are in all their messiness and glory. Yeah, so this space where everything is welcome. And that, of course, immediately regulates the nervous system.
mm.
Yeah, and there can be an openness and a curiosity about oneself. And then that allows someone to also look at the not so pretty things in
Mm,
oneself.
mhm.
If there's, if when we do it for ourselves, we do have to work harder to let go of the inner critic. And that's not so easy. And the coach can hold that space of the inner critic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And that opens up more space for growth and learning and development.
yeah. And creativity and innovation and the kinds of things that help us accelerate our best selves, not only ourselves, but the company as well. Karen
Yeah.
Liebenguth is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast. Karen, you're on LinkedIn, so we have your profile URL in our show notes. People can connect with you through that, learn more about the work that you do, send you some LinkedIn messages as well. Then percival.co.uk. Tell us what we'll find when we go to your site.
Yeah, you find a little bit more information about myself and my background, particularly around my work in nature, taking clients into nature, where that comes from, the benefits of being outside. And then a little bit more information about my different coaching services, executive coaching, leadership coaching, and then my days of coaching, full coaching days. And I also offer mindfulness for the workplace, helping people work with their minds.
Yeah, and mine's full, right, of their best selves. I love it. Absolutely love it. Karen Liebenguth, Work Positive Nation always wants to know from my guest about one thing they can do. So, Karen Liebenguth, what's your one thing that you would encourage Work Positive Nation to do starting today to create a positive work culture?
Encourage your employees to regularly spend time outside, to regularly take breaks, and to encourage people to spend time, quiet time, to reflect. All of everyone in the organization, including the leaders, everyone.
Outstanding.
And to actually do it, not just talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I started my day walking a couple of miles outdoors, and now after this podcast, I want to get back outdoors. So, right?
Wonderful.
The sense of well-being is just incredible. Karen, you have brought that calm and peace to us today, helped Work Positive Nation refocus for some of us, for others of us, maybe the first time really focusing on how we can become our best selves and therefore our companies can become their best versions of themselves, the way to grow people and profit. So Karen Liebenguth, thank you so much for spending time with Work Positive Nation today. We've learned a lot.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.